And you're gonna have to violate that child's like ability to consent, because you want that child to be preserved, right? Because that would be a lesser harm than allowing them to, you know, go through chemotherapy. Let's talk about Matt Walsh. Sure, let's talk about Matt Walsh today. I want to talk about Matt Walsh. All right, hold up.
Yeah.
Johnny the Walrus.
Oh, Abington.
Oh no.
Okay. Hello, boys and
Here we go, boys. You guys ready to feel highly suicidal?
Absolutely.
You guys ready for this stuff, dude?
And you come to the right place.
Some say play Fortnite.
All right, here we are. Here we go.
girls, my name is Matt Walsh. I am a children's author, and I've written a book called Johnny the Walrus. This book is all about identity and imagination.
Oh,
What is identity? Does anyone know what identity means?
No.
Do you know? You know what identity is? No? Okay.
See,
It's who
children
you
for
are,
a propaganda
right? That's what it
pieces
is. Now, who
based.
likes to pretend to be things? Is there anything you like to pretend to be? How about in the back?
I like to pretend to be
A ninja. That's a good one. What about you? All right. Well, we all like to use our imagination. Sometimes I use my imagination. I pretend to be a monster. I chase my kids around because I'm big and ugly, so I could be a monster. That's what this book is about. It's all
Whoa,
about a boy who
self-roasting
pretends to be
today.
a
Damn.
walrus. He identifies as a walrus, and his mom's a little silly. She takes it seriously and thinks he really is a walrus. That's silly, isn't it?
So what is this thing
Oh
going
God, here we go.
We don't have to worry about that. We're going to read the book now. Okay. Johnny's a boy with a big imagination. One day he's a dog, the next day a crustacean. It's like a crab or a lobster. One morning he came downstairs barking and clapping, wood spoons for tusks and sock fins a flapping. He had spoons in his mouth. He was pretending to be a walrus.
Just the trans shit, I'm guessing.
I'm Johnny the Walrus, he said with a roar. The wood floor's my ocean. The carpet's my shore. He's swimming around like a walrus. Isn't that silly? Johnny's mom loves her son's make-believe time. You're Johnny the Walrus till you change your mind, Mommy says. But Johnny's mom's phone said it's not just pretend. So she went on her phone, and there were people telling her that this isn't pretend. He's really a walrus. Only a bigot would say that. How dare you offend? What's a bigot? Anybody know?
So the first thing that we're going to be conflating within this book, I'm assuming, is that it's just playing, right? They're just like kids who just like pretend to be a woman. Just all of a sudden they get like transitions, or they go on hormones, or something like that. I believe there's actually a really long and really rigorous psychological assessment process before you actually even get puberty blockers. And by the time you're getting puberty blockers, you would have been like 13, 12, 13-ish, right? And then there aren't really long-term effects to puberty blockers, or negative long-term effects to puberty blockers, at least from what I've seen. And then you'd be actually making the decision to do the walrus transition at like 16 or something like that. Does anyone know who's like pretending to be a walrus at 16? Is that a thing? No, obviously it's not a thing. So in addition to that, right, we don't have people en masse killing themselves because they think they're a walrus. It's not really a thing, you know what I mean? It's this fear-mongering. It's this fear-mongering, this huge amounts of dishonesty. We're not having, like, 9-year-olds that are going through transition, right? That's not a thing. Instead, they're going to be assessed by a doctor, right? Someone who's very trained in the field. They're going to be assessed rigorously, and we're going to try and see if they actually do have some kind of disorder, and if we can prevent that early on, right? And then in addition to this, I think there's a lot of things that we actually allow to happen to kids if their parent consents to them, because of like this thing that we mentioned before, where there are like two harms that we both have to choose between, right? So there's one harm of like them being potentially suicidal, right? Or even like, let's take something that's less controversial. Let's say a child has cancer. It's probably not ideal they have to go through chemotherapy, but they're going to have to go through chemotherapy, and you're going to have to violate that child's like ability to consent, because you want that child to be preserved, right? Because that would be a lesser harm than allowing them to, you know, go through chemotherapy. And that situation is kind of being forced upon you. And we'd say that both action and inaction are basically the same thing in this scenario. Yeah. So, like, overall, it's just a really bad analogy, and this is just propaganda. In addition to this, if the things that we're, like, talking about, if people like Matt Walsh are talking about, were actually, like, on large thing, right? If people are en masse killing themselves, right? You'd see a really high detransition rate because people just, like, it's not for them, right? But actually, when we look at the data, right? I don't know if I want to go over the data, like, live on stream. That seems really, really boring. if I pull up some data, give me 1 second. I'm gonna like find the actual link for it. Detransition. All right. So if you actually look at like any study whatsoever, like any study on the subject, sorry about that. Just give me like 1 second. If you look at any study on the subject whatsoever, right? For example, let's take this study. Within this study, let me actually find the exact page document like part, because I think that's really important that I actually go over this on stream so people can like see what I'm talking about. So on page 155, where it talks about these detransitionings, right? It says that 11% of people who transition detransition in some way. But if we go into this page, right, and this is the data that they won't show you when they're making their propaganda, you can actually see why people detransition, right? So out of the 11% who detransition, 36% of them do it because of a pressure from a parent. Transitioning was too hard for them. There's a 33% chance. They face too much harassment and discrimination for as a transgender person, which is 31%. And these are, I'm guessing, like, these are not all like cumulative percentages, but those are the ones like the reason that they answered, right? So, and 29%, so they had trouble getting a job, and that's one reason they detransitioned. Pressure from family members is another reason why people detransition, at 26% of them responding that way. Pressure from a spouse or partner is at 18%. Pressure from an employer is 70%. Pressure from friends is 13%. And we go all the way down, almost at the exact bottom of the list, right? And then this is 5% of them. 5% of the 11% of people who detransitioned, so they realized gender transition was not for them. Do you guys how little of the sample size that actually is? Does anyone want to take a guess? Like do the quick math in your head? That's 0.4% of the total sample size that detransitioned because it wasn't for them. You'd be expecting that to be way higher if this was actually something that was happening, where people were being pressured into transition, even though it wasn't for them. And we know that people will be detransitioning because we actually see that when people have a brain that doesn't match their body, or they feel like they don't match their body, right? They tend to want to transition. So this is a really odd statistic if we're coming at this from the Matt Walsh perspective, that people are en masse being like forced to transition. This doesn't seem to be an actual thing that happens. So what they'll do is they'll show you that 11% of people detransition, but they won't show you that only 0.4% of the actual sample size, like the entire sample size, detransition because it wasn't right for them. Now, if you think 0.4% is actually a really large failure for any medical procedure, this is actually not the case at all. For example, amputations, false amputations happen at the rate of 3%. 3% of people who get it amputated on like the wrong end. But we don't stop doing amputations because of that. Actually, it seems that we can identify when people want to transition at a really, really high rate. In fact, we're really, really good at this. So this just doesn't seem to be the case. Matt Walsh is just spinning a narrative. There's absolutely no data to back up what Matt Walsh is saying.
Person, right? Mommy was told to take John for a checkup. All these people are holding signs. Johnny is a real walrus, one sign says. Human walruses are real walruses. Let Johnny transition, all these people are saying. You'll need to eat worms and to put on gray makeup. The worms give you whiskers.
Oh god, this is all just gonna be propaganda from like that false premise, isn't it?
The gray blends you in, the doctor says. And a simple procedure cuts feet into fins. The doctor wants to cut into Johnny and make him into a walrus.
Now, mind you, Johnny is like 5 years old as represented in this propaganda piece. And people aren't actually allowed to make the decision of like medically, physically, like get their like genital reassignment surgery. That doesn't happen until you're 18. So I don't know, dude. This seems like it's just meant to tug at your heartstrings and make you think a certain way. This doesn't seem like actually a cohesive argument, or like he's actually trying to make a point. I feel like nobody who actually watches Matt Walsh actually looks into any of the things that he says. I legitimately feel like that's the case. Oh, comments are turned off. Yeah, probably because it's on YouTube Kids. They're showing this to kids. YouTube's allowing this like pure propaganda to go to children. Oh god, the VC's full. Alright, let's just finish this video. Let's finish this video, dude.
That's scary.
It's gross eating worms, Mom. They're all so dang twitchy. He doesn't want to eat worms.
It's not bad for you. I thought I didn't eat worms, but I did.
Wood spoons kind of hurt, and the makeup is itchy. Deep down, Johnny's mom knew that something was wrong. Look at Johnny. He's dressed up like a walrus, but he's not having a fun time. But she felt so much pressure, she just went along. The internet people knew just what to do. She went back to the internet to look for answers. Never a good idea. And mommy was told to take John to the zoo. Now she's going to take her son to go live at the zoo like he's a real walrus.
Great.
I want to live at the zoo.
When Johnny
Oh,
arrived,
great.
the
This is
walrus
all just
grunted.
propaganda the rest
And
of
mommy
it,
says,
isn't it?
my boy's a real walrus. His
No,
growth was
this
just
is
stunted.
actual.
She really thinks this kid is a walrus.
Yeah, obviously, the 5-year-old kid is definitely going through transition. That's a real thing that definitely happens, Matt. You're so honest.
No. The zookeeper thought, what's she talking about? Ma'am, that's just a boy with wood spoons in his mouth. Now he's the voice of reason. But if I believe that, they'll say that I'm phobic. Protecting your son, ma'am, is what's most heroic.
Again, people don't go through transition at that age, and there'd be a rigorous medical process to determine as to whether they were actually transgender and the surgery was needed. In addition to this, it seems to be a really highly accurate rate because we see really low rates of detransitioning cited to be that they don't want to be that specific gender. But obviously Matt Walsh isn't going to tell anybody that because Matt Walsh is Matt Walsh, and Matt Walsh is not very honest with his videos. We've noticed that.
At last, Johnny's mommy was able to see that Johnny's not what he's pretending to be. Now mommy ignores the mean things on her phone, while Johnny pretends he's a bird flying home. The end.
Oh, God.
I just sat down and wrote it.
That's great. Yeah, okay. That was exactly what I thought it would be. That was horrible. There we go. I guess that's that.
Fuck Bunk. Tired of that dumbass loser. Crying in his bedroom while I'm cruising in my cruiser. This dumbass bitch, thinking that he's cool while streaming on Twitch. Call this Vietnam, we're gonna get you on a weight loss program. Everyone knows, you will never be a pro. While I'm putting my rap game, always tripping out, never no problems with burnout. The vids keep coming, so does the drama. Clear on your notepad, your tweets aging with a granddad. Capital of Chad, doing flips. Everyone in the chat, Bunk is a bitch. Yeah, Bunk is a bitch. No one likes Bunk.